The title is in no way clickbait. This is it. Today I'm sharing the most essential spiritual insight ever. Before we get into the topic, only about half of you watching are actually subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy these videos, please consider subscribing. It really helps out a new channel and it helps new people find these videos. It's a small gift that you can give to me. Thank you. So if you've been watching my videos, you've probably heard me say before that I don't think you need any more information. Especially most of you watching these kinds of videos, you probably already know intellectually what you need to know. And I really think that's true. I think a lot of our inner work lies in embodying and doing the practice so that we really integrate what we already know to be true. I know the light is kind of harsh right now, but I think it's going to pass soon. What I'm about to share in this video is the one essential understanding that I believe we need to truly find inner peace. It's the core truth of why we even have problems in this existence and how we can free ourselves from virtually all of our problems. So this is really it for me. This is the core insight or the core piece of wisdom that I think we all need. All other pieces of spiritual wisdom or advice, all good guidance, really seems like an elaboration of this, or in some cases, a watered down version of what I'm about to share. And by the end of the video, you'll see why. Okay, hopefully that's a bit better. If you happen to be new here, hello, my name is Parisa. I teach meditation and I started this channel to help you really develop a personal practice that works for you. Something that feels simplified and distilled and potent, super easy to follow so that you can access it when you need it the most. After 2 decades of study and practice in different spiritual traditions, I'm here to really distill all of that and share what is essential with you. So I'm glad you're here. So in the last video, which was a Vlogmas vlog style video, kind of a very lighthearted video, I sort of mentioned how I feel that a lot of self-help content out there is really a watered down version of the Four Noble Truths in Buddhism and this one single spiritual insight. But I didn't really elaborate. I didn't really go into explaining it. So today I thought I'd do that in the most simple, clear, and concise way that I know how, in my own words, according to my own understanding and how I've experienced benefit in my own life. And before we get into it, I really want to be clear. This is nothing that I invented. This is nothing that I came up with on my own. I did learn this in a Buddhist context, but it's really very universal in its message. And you certainly don't need to subscribe to any belief system to understand it and to benefit from it. If you're interested, you can look up the Four Noble Truths in Buddhism, and I can leave some links below. But otherwise, I invite you to just listen and see how everything lands. And as always, don't take my word for it. Don't take anybody on the internet's word for it. Some of this might be new, it might not be new, but really see how it lands and see how you have experienced this play out in your own life. This feels really important and special for me to share because it feels like such an essential teaching or an essential piece of wisdom. I knew at some point I had to make a video. You'll notice that what I'm about to talk about, I've touched on in virtually every other video I've ever made and everything that's worth anything that I've ever put out into the world, because I truly believe it's that much of a core truth. Today, I really wanted to share in plain language, in my own words, about this very universal truth, this very essential piece of wisdom. And really, to me, it is the only one that we need. I truly believe that everything else really stems from this. It may seem simple, but make no mistake, it is potent and deep. It explains why things are the way that they are, why it feels to be how it feels to be as a human being. It explains the source or the root of all of our problems. And it also points to a way to become free of all of our problems. So let's get into it. So wherever you are, just take a moment to notice what it's like to be alive in this moment. I love this quote by John O'Donohue. It's like the opening line to his book, Anamkara, and it says, "It is strange to be here." I just love that so much. It encapsulates for me, what it's like to be here. It's really strange sometimes when you really pay attention, and wonderful and fascinating and all of it, and deep and crazy and beautiful. So if you're watching this, you're an embodied human being and you have all of this sensory information coming in. That's what it is to feel like you're here right now. There's a sense of weight to the body. There's all these sensations, so temperature and pressure wherever you're sitting, and just all sorts of sensory information coming through the skin and the muscles in the body. There's, of course, your sense of sight. There's sound. There's smell and taste. So all of these pieces add up to what it feels like to be here right now. And then, of course, that's not it. Outside of the five senses, we have our thinking mind. So this whole layer of our interior lives, thinking and feeling emotions. The five senses are what ground us and anchor us in the here and now. What we are feeling physically, the sensations, what we're able to see and hear and touch and taste, all of these are in the present moment. And then the thinking mind, maybe you can call it our sixth sense, but that is really what takes us out, what can take us out of presence. And that one is the one that can really take us away from presence. And we can be thinking about the future, planning and anticipating and worrying. And we can be in the past and remembering and recalling and maybe regretting. And most of us know that a lot of our problems seem to come from our thinking mind when we're not fully in the body, when we're not fully in this present moment, and when we're somewhere else in stories. Now, I want to be clear. It's not that thinking is bad. There's nothing wrong with what the mind is doing. In fact, it's a beautiful mind that is there to protect us and is there to help us plan and create and do all of the cool things that we can do as humans. So none of what I'm about to say today, and I'll touch on this a little bit later, but none of what I want to express is about that thinking is bad and that we should stop thinking, but it's to recognize that the thinking mind does lean toward negativity, and that's to protect us, and we can be really grateful for that mechanism, but we can really guide our attention away from it when it's not being very helpful, which, let's be honest, most of the time it's not very helpful to just be in thought. I like the idea of using thought when we need it as another tool and to not have it be our resting place. But anyway, more on that later. And so when you really pay attention to the experience of that thinking mind, it's often in the realms of, again, because we have this negativity bias that is built into us for a good reason, usually the thinking mind is by default in the realms of thinking about what could be better, what could be different, what we could have more of. Really this sense of not being quite satisfied with the way things are in this very moment. So it's like a constant, albeit often a very, very subtle sense of just unease or being a little unsatisfied, a little not okay. And so this feeling, I guess you could call it, of unsatisfactoriness, you can describe it in many ways and you can use many words to point to the same thing. Unsatisfactoriness or suffering is a really common translation. To use some traditional language that comes from Eastern philosophy and Eastern wisdom traditions, we could describe it as having expectations that aren't in line with reality. We could describe it as a sense of non-acceptance, of resistance, of fighting, of not allowing what is to be. We could describe it as controlling, forcing, this efforting, this tightness, this gripping, this longing, and really an aching longing, an aching desire for something. So what we're talking about is either subtly or not so subtly painful. There is something in us that aches or hurts, or at least is uncomfortable. You could also describe it as this sense of seeking or chasing or trying to reach for something. So again, to use some traditional language, words that are often used to describe this are grasping, craving, and even attachment. And on the other side of it, you may want things to be different because you may not want what is here. So that's the other side of wanting, is not wanting what is here. And that could be, again, to use traditional language, usually described as aversion. I like the words resistance or fighting or turning away from or tightening against. Personally, I quite like the term grasping, and maybe I'll use, as a shorthand, I'll use grasping for most of this video. But essentially, the insight is saying that this grasping causes us suffering and is the root of all of our difficulty, all of our problems. Stress and anxiety and fear and sadness and anger and all of these other negative states or negative emotions. Well, you could trace all of these back to this root, to this core of non-acceptance, of grasping, and of not accepting things as they are, not being okay with things as they are, which is again why I feel like it's such a beautiful, distilled, concentrated teaching. Everything comes back to this not being okay with the way that things are. And it really points to this underlying sense of we're not okay, we're not good enough, we're not whole, or we're not complete just as we are. As I'm talking about this stuff, a lot of times I end up really gesturing wildly. And for me, there's a real strong embodiment, I guess, to craving and to grasping. And it is truly, literally this sense as if I can feel in my body when I am really in that place, that my body is really making this gesture of grasping. And there's tightness and there's tension and there's, and it's really uncomfortable. So forgive me, as I'm talking about it, I probably will be gesturing a lot. Maybe it's helpful to picture it that way for you too, and to feel it in your body that way, but it certainly is helpful for me to really be talking to you from an embodied experience. And I can feel all this really vividly as I'm sharing this. And so if this root cause of all of our problems, all of our difficulty is this grasping, this tight gripping, you can almost already guess what the remedy to all of our problems might be. So if we're talking about our interiority kind of being like this, and that being the root of all of our problems, you can imagine what would be balancing, what would be the remedy for that, what would really be balancing to that. And it's really about loosening the grip, opening the palm, letting go of trying to control or change or make things different, better, or more. And just resting in that place of allowing things to be the way that they are and being in radical acceptance of the way things are. To use a traditional term, we would call this equanimity. So it's that feeling evenness and balance and being cool and calm and okay with however things are. And so how do we actually apply this into our lives? You'll notice that it's the thinking mind that spins all the stories that things should be different than they are. And by the way, it's that very thinking mind and being in the stories that causes us to be dysregulated and physiologically be in a state of, at the very least, mild discomfort or unease. And in more extreme cases, full-blown panic or an aching pain. So if it's our thinking mind that convinces us that things should be different and whatever this reality is not good enough, then it's the releasing from the thinking mind, disentangling from the thinking mind, and coming back into presence that's really the remedy, really the way that we balance things. And how we can come into presence is come into the sensory experience of this moment. And so we can come into our breath, we can come into our senses, all of our 5 senses. And by the way, this pathway is also what brings regulation, also what brings a sense of physiological calm into our body. When we're really, really in our senses, when we're really rooted in what we can feel and see and hear and taste and all of it, what we can really experience right now, it's almost impossible to still be in those stories of grasping. And so naturally there's a softening. Naturally we feel a little bit lighter and there's more peace. So here we are, and I'm communicating to you through language. But what we're trying to describe is really beyond language, which is maybe why I tend to gesture a lot and really make shapes with my body. But it's really true that so much of this experience is beyond language, though we can do our best. We do our best, and we can point to a lot of things through language. But ultimately, it is beyond language. And I think that's why it's really important to me to use the language of the body. And the other thing that I really like to do is keep language simple and minimal. So yes, sometimes it's worth taking a few words or many, many words to communicate and express. But after we have an understanding of this truth, an understanding of this insight, for myself, I know in my personal practice, I tend to use what I call anchor words, or some key words that really point to what I need and help remind myself what I need to do in that moment. I can offer myself an anchor word, maybe you can call it a guiding word, that really is a linguistically minimal way to point to the practice, to point to the truth and the insight, and also point to the pathway or the practice that I need to become more free. And this can also really help us not intellectualize too much or get caught up in the ideas, in the concepts, and again, get back into the thinking mind, which is what we're really trying to disentangle and free ourselves from. So some of the key words that I use are words like, first of all, you can use some words to really lightly label the grasping or the craving that you notice, right? And again, instead of getting into a long story about, well, I'm feeling like this and da 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 da, it's kind of like, oh, just craving. Oh, just forcing. Oh, just controlling. And you can kind of notice that and lightly, if it's helpful, use that word to really recognize it and label it. Sometimes that can help create space too. And then also, okay, what is it that I need right now? What is it that I need right now to work skillfully with it, to practice, to really free myself? Often those words for me are relax, soften, let go, maybe take it easy, be in flow, let yourself be in flow. And sometimes these words sound like cliche things we might say to ourselves or others might say to us, and it might sound trivial. But it's really not trivial at all. Just like we might boil down the essence of this insight to a sentence like craving causes suffering, we might also cue ourselves in our practice to just simply relax or let go or soften. And it's not just to be trivial or to oversimplify it. It's because these cues can be really potent and can really point to a lot for us. And sometimes these little cues, when you get really good at offering them to yourself in key moments, can really help us come into presence and come into peace. I think I've mentioned before, but relax, just that one word, especially as someone who does tend to have a personality that is often trying to control and force and make everything perfect, that cue of relaxing, and feeling it in that body, feeling that relaxation through the body, and having that sense of softness and opening and decontracting really be reflected in the inner experience. So good, so good. So again, as you're listening, I hope you're not just either accepting or rejecting anything that you hear. Whatever you're hearing here, and whether it's the words of the Buddha or some person on the internet, I hope you really give it a chance to feel into your own experience and try it out again in your own body, in your own mind, and see if you experience this to be true. Is this craving and non-acceptance of reality as it is really the core of all of the difficulty that you experience in your life? And again, it's part of being human, and it is nearly constantly there. And so it's nothing to judge yourself or judge your life. We can really have compassion and gentleness when we really open up to this and notice this. And sometimes it's really, really subtle, and it might just be just a little bit of tightness, a little bit of being uncomfortable, or this really quiet, subtle sense of unease. And then, of course, there are times in our life where it's much louder. Let me do a little demonstration. If I check in with myself right now. Let me really adjust my posture and really feel into my body. Okay, what is here right now? Yeah, I feel like this entire time that I've been filming this video, there has been some tightness here. I can recognize that there has been this sense of craving or grasping or forcing. And for me, it's because I am trying to do something and I have this desire to do a good job. I have honestly an attachment to the outcome. I want to make sure that my ideas are expressed in a certain way. I want to make sure that my ideas are received in a certain way. Maybe if I'm honest, I have some other ideas that I want to be perceived in a certain way. As I've been filming, there's been a quiet tension. And again, nothing wrong with that, okay? And that might be a small example, and that might be something that's totally manageable, but that's just one example that, I can in this moment find more peace, even as I'm doing the thing. And that doesn't mean I stop doing what I'm doing. It doesn't mean that I say, oh, I'm a little bit uncomfortable and now I'm going to stop doing this. It's really about recognizing, okay, well, where am I gripping? Where am I trying to force something? And can I release? Can I come into presence? And can I really just be here right now? And in this moment, do my best to speak from my heart and to deliver this wisdom in the most honest and real way that I can. And not think about, again, not being in the thinking mind, not think about the future, not think about how it's going to land on the other side, not think about how many people are going to like it or dislike it. How can I really stay in this moment, stay in this good intention in my heart? And as I'm talking, I'm able to sort of already walk myself back into this place. There's more inner peace. So from the outside, maybe I'm still doing the thing, I'm still talking, I'm still continuing to make this video. But on the inside, there's a little bit more ease, a little bit less tension. And that just means that I can enjoy this process more. I can enjoy my life more, and I can feel more peaceful as I'm continuing to do the things in my life. And I mean, to me, that is the point of spiritual practice. So let's use a few real life examples so that we can kind of play with and practice applying this to everyday life. Let's say that we're stressed about money. Often when we're stressed about things like money, we're probably thinking about the future, as we should. Planning is a good thing. Again, not vilifying the thinking, but noticing that the thinking tends to be negative and we don't need to be thinking about the thing all the time. And so noticing when the stories are really spinning these emotions of fear and worry, and then noticing how it's possible to notice when that's happening and come back into the sensory experience of the moment. Again, regulating ourselves through breath, through sensation in the body, and maybe seeing if we can even shift our attention to, instead of what we don't have, what we have, all the things that we have to be grateful for. And that doesn't mean we just think about gratitude and we don't look for a job or we don't look for ways to earn income. But that action can come from a different place, a different energy that's more clear, probably more effective to do the things that we need to do. Maybe another example is social anxiety, super common for a lot of us. For me, when I think about times when I've been anxious in social situations, there is this sense of thinking into the future and thinking, well, how am I going to be perceived by others? What are they going to think about me? What are they going to say about me? So again, it's kind of projecting into the future. So in that moment, and this could be like literally you're in the middle of a social situation, you're standing in the middle of a party, it's coming into your senses, really feeling sensation in your feet if you're standing, really noticing your breath. And if you're talking to somebody, seeing if you can just be there for that, having heart-to-heart connection with another human, and you're really able to really be there fully for that moment and hopefully enjoy the social situation more. And so we can go on and on. Virtually any time that things don't go our way, that we don't get what we want, is a chance to kind of notice that grasping in us, and notice that that's adding an unnecessary layer of suffering or hurt or pain or discomfort. You can pause and notice and really feel that aching, right? That's really how I would describe it. And often along with that, there's a story, again, projecting into the future. Well, what if this and if only that? And if we can come back into the sensory experience of this moment, it's like, okay, outside of the story telling me that it's not okay, maybe actually everything is okay in this moment. And the beautiful thing with having a personal practice is with experience, there's repetition, and you've kind of guided yourself through this so many times that you can begin to really trust yourself that, oh yeah, I've been here before, I've felt this aching before, and I know that it's actually okay. And similarly, we've all probably been in situations where we have gotten what we wanted, and it didn't turn out to be the lasting satisfaction or the lasting happiness that we thought it would be. So again, that sort of reminder that, okay, grasping is always kind of going to be there, and we don't have to be ruled by it, and we can become free of the chase. Before we wrap up, I want to make two important clarifications. One of them is there's nothing wrong with desire. And this insight isn't meant to tell us that we should abolish all of our desires and that we should not want anything at all, and we should never want to make any changes, and we should just always be in this state of non-wanting and just be this bland zombie. No. There's a difference between an aspiration, and even that word aspiration kind of for me is filled with lightness and, for lack of a better term, like a soft, open energy, right? And there's still that forward motion of wanting to do something, whether it's wanting to make a change in your life, whether you want to create something, simply have experiences and live your life. What we're really talking about here is that instead of focusing on what is possible, the energy of grasping focuses on what is wrong, what we don't have. So that subtle difference is really important. We can still use our thinking mind as a beautiful, wonderful, brilliant tool that it is to create and to plan a beautiful life for ourselves. The other note that I want to clarify, and this used to come up a lot when I used to teach in person, is when we use the term radical acceptance, it doesn't mean that we abandon or that we give up or that we surrender and we don't do anything in our lives, especially in the face of justice. Especially in times we're living right now, it doesn't mean that we stop working toward change, whether it's in our own lives or out in the world, and really be a force for justice and make change. What we're really talking about here is an inner softening. So we're orienting ourselves, instead of anger and hate and resentment, to what is possible, what we actually want to move toward. And focusing on the goodness that is possible is just a really different energy, and actually probably a way more effective way to do and take action in the world. All right, and that's it for today. I'm going to pause here for now, attempt to wrap up right now. We can definitely elaborate on this a lot more, and I always welcome discussion that can clarify our understanding of this. But really for me, this truth, this insight represents a distilled version of everything else. I truly believe that this one spiritual insight is all we really need. And I suppose it's connected to a deeper truth, that this craving comes from this false sense of being a separate self. And when we dissolve that story of being a separate self and we really feel one with everything, then craving just naturally falls away, because there's no separation. There's no separate thing that needs to obtain anything else. There's no thing that needs to change. And so in a way, that is the deepest insight. In a lot of ways, it can be really hard to grasp. And honestly, in all of my years of being in spiritual traditions and studying and practicing and seeing many other people study and practice, I don't think that understanding, if it does feel like a bit of a reach for you, I don't think it's necessary. If we're talking about wanting to really enjoy benefit in our lives and freedom in our lives, then the understanding that it's really that mechanism of craving that causes us difficulty, that's the key thing to understand. Again, simple but not easy, and we can spend an entire lifetime, and I feel like I've spent half my life, and almost half my life, and all of my adult life really, practicing this. And I hope that doesn't make it sound like it's such an impossible task, because yes, you can spend a lifetime or maybe many lifetimes practicing, but also even in the very beginnings of really waking up to this truth, there's freedom right there. Even in the very first steps as you're practicing, embodying this and letting go of the grasping, even in the very beginning of the path, if that's where you are, there's a lot of freedom to be enjoyed. As you move through the rest of your day, really maybe notice, right now you're on YouTube, maybe it's one more video, one more thing, one more book, one more teaching, one more tool, one more news article, one more question to ChatGPT, one more thing that I need to figure out. Just notice if you're caught up. And it happens to all of us. So again, no judgment, compassion, but notice when you're caught in that. And that's the most powerful thing you can do, is to just pay attention so that you can notice that. And remind yourself, bring yourself back to this simple truth, or in the Buddhist context, the 4 simple truths, which are: this is what it's like to be human. So again, having compassion for yourself, relaxing, this is just the way it is. And then recognizing that grasping, that chase is the root of all of our problems. And then recognizing that it is possible to become free. And finally, the path to that freedom is paying attention so that we can notice when we're caught in the thinking mind. We can come back to the sensory experience, come back into presence, relax into a place of radical acceptance or allowing, and just relaxing into what is right here, right now. Just this breath in this body, in this moment. Softening again and again. And I'll offer one more thing here to extend the practice further, which is to guide the mind into something bright, into goodness. So training the mind, instead of focusing on what is not right, what is right, what is good, what is something that can bring us gratitude and joy in this moment. And I think extending our practice in that way can really help us to retrain and rebalance the mind into presence, but also into brightness and light and goodness. There you have it, the only spiritual insight you'll ever need. Truly, truly liberating. And I do believe that it's all you'll ever need. It's the only insight or piece of wisdom that you may ever need. But we do need to practice. And one thing that can make our practice more fruitful and supportive is companionship and others. I love this idea of holding hands and keeping each other company and kind of walking each other home. So one thing that I'll leave you with, some resources in case you do want that companionship and that support. You don't want any more companionship right now? Okay. One resource that I'll leave you with is the Essential Map. I'll leave a link in the description. And it's something that you can download for free. It is a simplified version of what I use in my practice every day to sort of orient myself. And by the way, when I talk about having these shorthand words or these little minimal cues like relax or soften or let go or whatever it is that works for you, as I move through the map, and after I've sort of checked in and asked myself where I am, when I ask myself, what do I need? That's really where those cues or those anchor words come in. And that's how I remind myself of what I need to really free myself in that moment. So if you're interested in a tool that really helps you clarify and simplify and guide your practice, you can check that out. And on that note of companionship and practicing in community, starting next month, I'm opening up what was a drop-in group practice for people that have done a program or a workshop with me. I'm opening that up to everyone for free once a month, first Sunday of the month online. It's just a chance to come together, whatever form your practice may be, to just come together with like-minded people. I do a short guided practice, and it's just kind of a chance to check in, say hello, be together. If you're interested in that, find a link below to join the email list, and that's the best way you'll know how to access that. I think that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here. I love you, and it is so good to be here together. I'll see you in the next one.